It's our safety, the safety of our children, and the users of this trail that's at stake here. And for a tenth of a percent even of the cost of this whole project, you said something like $100 million, and you're quibbling over 770,000. That's just wrong.
Hi, I'm Lainey Law.
And I'm attorney Andrew Myers.
Rail trails are great. They're straight, they're narrow, perfect for biking or hiking.
Yeah, but something happened in the future planning of this trail in Derry, New Hampshire. They're going to bend it into something, well, stay tuned. You'll see. Lainey had to go put air in her tires, and it started raining again. So I had to come back inside. The interstate highway system was envisioned and constructed back in the 1950s and 60s. More specifically, I-93 construction through southern New Hampshire started back in 1961. Well, it wasn't long before rapid southern New Hampshire growth caused more and more traffic, not only on I-93, but in the roads that came to and went off of Route I-93. In Derry and Londonderry, the traffic just choked the towns, especially going into Derry at rush hour in the morning and the afternoon. The same thing over in Londonderry. So planners took a look, and they said what was needed was a new exit. They called it Exit 4A because it would be north of the then existing Exit 4. There was a problem. As much as the road was needed, the new Exit 4A, there wasn't a lot of money for that. So the political world started looking for funds to fund the project. Fast forward now to the final phases of planning and the beginning of construction. A little bit of an issue cropped up, and we're going to take a look at it right now. The old abandoned Lawrence to Manchester Railroad right-of-way was never fully developed in one section into the contemplated rail trail, and would intersect with the east-west connecting road needed for the new Exit 4A traffic. Then on July 20th of 1920, plans were presented showing a box tunnel routing the rail under the new connecting road. While the tunnel departs slightly from the east of the old railroad right-of-way, the engineering firm of Fuss & O'Neill proposed a tunnel. The tunnel would go straight through and under the new connector road. The engineering firm recommended the straight-through tunnel, saying that this option met all of the New Hampshire Department of Transportation vertical and horizontal clearance requirements for pedestrian trails and was the most economical option. But the New Hampshire Department of Transportation rejects that plan. Instead, DOT plans call for a push-button signal alerting traffic on the new east-west access road to stop for pedestrians, cyclists, and others. An approximately 1,000-foot trail loop goes to the east, down a slope, under the new access road, and back over to the west, connecting with the new bike and pedestrian trail. Detractors call it a spaghetti loop. They point to a hairpin turn, blind curves, and inclines steeper than the state recommends for pedestrian trails. The DOT claims the loop plan is a sensible balance of all stakeholders' interests that provides safe and reasonable access for trail users accessing the trail with an improved roadway alignment in a cost-effective manner. But a now retired engineer who worked for the DOT for over 25 years, Alex Vogt, disputes that. Alex Vogt, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Andrew.
As a project engineer for the Department of Transportation for all those years, what were your duties? What did you do?
Well, primarily as a project engineer, I was involved early in the design of the projects, following all the codes and layouts of the highways and estimating quantities and things like that. And then as a project manager, it's mostly scheduling and taking care of the costs involved. So budget and schedule, along with coordinating a lot of the public outreach and talking to people and talking to the towns and elected officials to make sure the project is what they want it.
Okay, so when you first saw the exit 4A Derry Rail Trail evolve from the tunnel that went straight underneath the access road into the loop alternative, what were your first thoughts?
Well, I was just so surprised that they'd take such a drastic change, after years of input from people, and the original design to have the tunnel appeared to be a pretty good design. It kept the trail straight and relatively flat, and all of a sudden I see this convoluted spaghetti layout, and I just knew it wasn't a good layout. It was way too long, and tried to get more information on it, and New Hampshire DOT wouldn't give it for many, many months until finally they had a meeting.
Specifically, when you saw the turns and the grades, what were your thoughts as an engineer?
Well, I knew that a rail trail had people, especially bicyclists, that can move along pretty quickly. So the sharp turns just didn't make sense to me to throw that in when you're coming along a straight trail for miles, and to have a sharp turn like that. And then when I saw the grades close to 5%, I said, well, yeah, that does meet technically the ADA, but there was long grades, and rate coming into a sharp turn just didn't make sense to me. They have a couple grades there that are basically just to the maximum that ADA allows, 5% grade. But they have this grade at for 250 feet coming into a sharp turn. And then if you're heading the other way, heading south, it goes on for 400 feet. So, you don't have to be an engineer to figure out that if you're just coasting down that grade, you're going to exceed a pretty good speed, over 20 miles an hour. And it throws you into some sharp line curves and just not a good situation.
What about the feature that the DOT points to where people can, in fact, cross the new access road, but they've got to make a left turn and go over some gravel and punch one of those activators that'll stop the traffic, supposedly? What about that feature?
Well, that's almost preferred because it's almost a quarter mile shorter. But of course, having to push a button and wait, you know what that's like. You push a button, you wait and wait and wait, and people just won't a lot of times. So it's an option, but it's not a good option for the amount of users that are predicted to be on this trail. It's just won't work. I think it's just not a good layout at all. I don't think it meets the design criteria. There's national standards for rail trails, and this doesn't meet that at all. I think it's unethical in many ways to go forward and build this and stamp a plan that has.
Have you had any common communication with the DOT about the plan? And if so, what was the nature of that communication?
Well, I sent them quite a bit of communication expressing concern with the design standards, and they come back and say, well, the design is for 12 mile an hour. It's going to slow people down. It's a nice scenic meandering path. And I say, well, this is not a path. This is the rail trail that we're designing here. And therefore, it doesn't meet the design criteria.
Now, the state statute that I'm going to show you in a second, as soon as I get it up on the screen, state statute says that they will hold these hearings, and they did hold these hearings. But the interesting thing that I found about the New Hampshire state law was that although they have to hold these hearings, the law says they may admit or reject any evidence offered, and there shall be no appeal from their findings. So they held the hearings, and correct me if I'm wrong, nearly everyone was opposed to the thing, but they ignored all of that evidence. In your experience, have you ever seen DOT go through one of these hearings and then they listened and they did change or alter a plan?
Well, sure. It happens quite frequently that they listen to what people have to say, and especially what the town officials want, and try to accommodate it. There's certain limitations that you can't spend money on because it's transportation funds. But certainly we've made changes when I was a project manager on many projects after hearings, and they could easily go back. They had the original design. There's no reason they can't go back to it.
Okay, you had indicated to me that there's a law. The name of the show is about the law. There's another law that says that people that, engineers specifically, that are in the design phase are liable for quite a while. Why did you want me to include this?
Well, I thought it was important to, especially I sent this to DOT also, and they kind of brushed it off saying that it doesn't apply. They're not worried about it. But I think it's important that they're aware that, they have a liability and ethics to put a design out there that's safe. And if they knowingly put out a design that they know is not safe, then they could be liable. And it's just not good engineering.
That is what we call a procedural statute. New Hampshire law actually has evolved over the years, and the Supreme Court has said that state and municipal officials are generally exempt from liability where they have a discretionary function. And the examples that they gave in the court were whether or not to lay out roads, location of parking spaces, placement or abandonment of an alley, and traffic control. So generally speaking, the court has been protective of people that make discretionary decisions, such as designing a rail trail like this. But you feel that this is something that they should understand?
Yes, I do, because I think I've pointed out that they haven't been following the national codes, and that's important. And it's important that they follow safety measures. Now, certainly discretionary functions, it makes sense that you can be exempt from prosecution on that. But when you purposely know that you're doing something wrong, then you should be held accountable.
Right. Okay, Mr. Vogt, thank you. Any closing thoughts before we move along?
I just hope we can get this tunnel back into the project. I know DOT's now saying schedule is a problem, but they themselves moved the schedule, the add date, 5-6 months. So sooner they get it in, they can get it done.
So why is it exactly that people are so in favor of this loop in the rail trail?
Well, some of the advocates for the loop say that the reason that they deviated from the straight-through tunnel and went for the loop is because, they've been planning the 4A exit off of Route 93 for years and years and years, decades actually. And what they're saying is that, when they started doing the plans for the exit 4A, the rail trail was not even in existence. And so when they were doing the plans, the rail trail just wasn't even on their radar.
Is it true that the rail trail didn't exist?
No. There's a 2003 study, a study that as we stand here is 20 years ago. And what the study said was, we want, as the New Hampshire Department of Transportation, to work on a rail trail, a rail and pedestrian and bicycling trail that goes from Salem, New Hampshire, all the way up to Concord. And in that New Hampshire Department of Transportation sanctioned plan that they signed off on, they focused on the Manchester to Lawrence line, which runs right through Derry. And in fact, there's a page in which they show a proposed possible route in green, showing a straight through path through the 1.6 mile stretch that's now being developed, but not straight through in a loop. And so to say that the rail trail did not exist when they were doing the 4A planning just flies in the face of all of the evidence.
That's crazy. Let's dive deeper into that.
Okay, let's go. We did continue to explore, and here is the 2003 Bikeway Feasibility Study done by the New Hampshire Department of Transportation. It's entitled the Salem to Concord Bikeway Feasibility Study. We focus on the bottom of the cover page just to confirm the date the study was completed and submitted on April 30th of 2003. Going inside the study, we see some photographs on the left of the very small portion of the rail trail that was paved back in those days. On the right, you see the old Derry train station, the Derry Depot. It was being renovated back then. They turned it into a restaurant, and these days it is operated as Sabatino's Italian restaurant. This page tells us that according to data provided by the New Hampshire Department of Transportation, this segment of the former Lawrence and Manchester Branch Railroad is owned by Delaware Rock Incorporated. That corporation is a predecessor of the legal entity that currently owns the now undeveloped segment of the rail trail we're focusing on here. The current owners are donating that land for the purpose of completing the rail trail. Here is the rail trail as it was envisioned coming up through the railroad right-of-way in the northern section of Derry that we're talking about and the southern portion of Londonderry. In this section, it more or less parallels Route 93, but again, it was envisioned back in the year 2003 in this study. Now, the 2003 study clearly envisions a Manchester to Lawrence corridor, the goal stated to design and construct a rail trail project between the New Hampshire-Massachusetts state line and Depot Street in Manchester. It's all part of the project that was foreseen way back then. The feasibility study documents and confirms the feasibility of developing a suggested bicycle and pedestrian facility or route from Salem to Concord. Implementation of the route as described in this chapter requires community involvement and ownership. In order for the project to move beyond the feasibility study, it must be shown to be technically feasible, which has largely been demonstrated herein, economically sound, affordable, and supported locally. Communities will have to continue to discuss the project issues and make a series of difficult choices. The study concludes, stating, the New Hampshire Department of Transportation will assist the communities interested in moving forward on this important project. But again, back in 2003, this project was seen as feasible and affordable, and the Lawrence to Manchester line, specifically Derry, was envisioned in the study.
I'd like to ask the people tonight, raise your hand if you feel going through a tunnel is safer than the plan that's being shown. Thank you.
My name is Paula Bedard. I'm here representing the Bike Walk Alliance of New Hampshire. We are the statewide biking and walking advocacy organization. So please understand that I'm speaking for the voice of all the bicyclists and walkers in the state of New Hampshire. We're very disappointed, obviously, in the alternative plan. It is not the right solution. We want to go back to the tunnel plan. It is the safest, simplest, most convenient plan. Anytime you have an opportunity to separate bike ped users from motor vehicle traffic, you should do so.
My first question to the designers is, what is the design speed for the rail trail?
So under the Shieldsbrook Bridge and including that U, it's a 12 mile an hour design speed for the rail trail.
And what's the minimum radius for that then?
I don't have that on top of my head.
I am with State Representative Richard Tripp. Mr. Tripp, why is it that you do not approve of the box-through tunnel underneath the new extension road to exit 4A to accommodate the rail trail?
I have one basic reason, and that is it's going to delay completion of the exit 4A project.
Well, beyond that, I mean, they've had 40 years to plan exit 4A, and they've had plenty of time to, the rail trail advocates will say they've had plenty of time to do it. And the box tunnel, the very first option, was the first option. Why do you feel that they should have done the loop trail?
Well, it's one of the things is, as I told you previously, I'm not a the rail trail is not a big concern of mine, other than because the exit 4A project is to provide for economic development of both Londonderry and Derry. You know, the rail trail completion is just a happy side effect. You know, and that being the case, anything that would delay completion of the exit 4A project is not necessary.
What about the concerns that the rail trail advocates have raised that the loop trail has a steep grade? It's just barely within ADA, and it also has a number of right angles that would be unsafe for bicycles and other people.
Well, you know what? That's an interesting thought, because I don't know about the steep angles, but I mean the steep grades. But like I said, when you had asked me about this, I realized I didn't know hardly anything about the rail trail. So I've been researching it, and one of the things that I did is I went over to Londonderry. I think it's Sanborn Road. The rail trail comes up to that, and it makes a 90-degree turn. You know, I understand that's bad, but that's something that is already in place in Londonderry, you know, to where it goes across Route 28. So, 90-degree turns, I think that's probably subjective. People are looking for reasons to say that the Shields Brook route is dangerous.
All right, well, the Department of Transportation in New Hampshire says that they're saving $770,000. That's not very much on a project that's now up to $139 million. Is that right?
No, I would agree. Saving that much is not a major saving, but being a state rep, we do try to keep the cost down. And if you can save $750,000, that's fine with me.
Does it make any sense on a common sense basis to replace a straight through box tunnel with a trail that loops around, goes over, I don't know, an eighth of a mile, then loops underneath the road there and then comes back over? Does that make any sense from a common sense point of view?
Well, actually it does. One of the documents that I brought over for you talks about the effect that putting the box tunnel in would have on the roadbed. It would raise it approximately 12 feet, and if you've been out to Madden Road, you'll see that road has a significant grade to begin with. If you add another 12 feet, now you're making it into what I would characterize as a ski slope during the winter. By putting the crossing at the bottom, you're effectively raising the hill. You're effectively decreasing the slope in that condition.
So you don't buy the argument that the straight through tunnel has many safety advantages over the loop trail?
No, I agree. It doesn't have that many safety advantages.
Why do you think this issue has become so emotional on both sides? Because I've talked to people for the Rail Trail Alliance, and I've talked to people that are against the rail trail, and it's very emotional on both sides. Why do you think that is?
I don't think the people that walk the rail trail are that involved in this, because they're out there for the exercise. An extra quarter mile to them is a benefit. It gives them a chance to exercise a little bit more, go down and look at the brook.
We're here at the New Hampshire Department of Transportation building in Concord, New Hampshire. Now, in my effort to be fair and totally accurate about the rail trail situation in Derry, we invited the project managers of the rail trail, but for whatever reason, they didn't want to come down out of their office and talk to us. However, back in the hearing that was held on September 22nd of 2022, a lot of people from Derry showed up and expressed their opinions. Not very many, if any, were in favor of the loop plan. Now, what the Department of Transportation said at that time was that the loop plan would save the state $770,000 off the overall Exit 4A plan, which at that time was estimated at $120 million. So I asked the Department of Transportation people that were at that hearing, you know, the federal government last year in 2022 had just passed a bipartisan $1 trillion infrastructure bill. And that money was made available nationwide to improve our infrastructure. Part of that money went to Berlin, New Hampshire for a heated sidewalk plan. So I asked the Department of Transportation, why didn't they go for some of that infrastructure money, $1 trillion? It would have been available. And I was told money was no problem. I don't know why DERRY gets a pretzel. For some reason, DERRY always gets the short shift when it comes to planning. The President of the United States and the Congress, Republicans and Democrats are on TV every night telling us they have money for infrastructure. They're spending millions and millions, billions and billions. It's an election season right now, and money is flowing out of Washington. Have we looked at that money? Can we stop the pretzel or the spaghetti until we take a look at all of those options? Because it's just a bad option. This thing has been in the planning stage for 40 years, and all of a sudden, with the pressure on, with the contract already signed, we have to do the pretzel.
Basically, no, we haven't looked into additional funding for the project because it's already fully funded.
It's not fully funded if you are saying that, well, we don't want to build the $1.17 million bridge. So initially, the reason for the loop alternative was money. It was said that it would save $770,000 on a $120 million job. So money was a problem, and then money wasn't a problem. You can figure that one out. So another issue that came up at that meeting, the public hearing, was safety. Mark Connors asked, and there was a room full of engineers filling up 2 tables, as well as the project manager. Mark Connors asked them, was there anyone who could vouch for the safety of the new alternative? Not a single person stood up.
Why are we here? And as I said, I would like to close this by asking any of you from the DOT, can any one of you say, this is a safer alternative? I'd really like an answer. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your comment. Are there any additional comments tonight?
Joining me now is Mark Connors. He is the president of the DERRY Rail Trail Alliance. He's also on the board of the Granite State Rail Trail Alliance. Mark, welcome.
Thank you, Andy. Good to be
Mark,
here.
I know you've been very passionate about the alternative to the straight through tunnel. Why are you so passionate about it?
Well, I think the real key is getting the right and safest alternative in place for the rail trail. The reason I'm so passionate, I started working with Eric Whitney and a few other folks way back in 2007 to build the rail trail in DERRY. So that's how I got involved and have basically dedicated the last 20 years in trying to, 15 plus years trying to get this rail trail through DERRY. So the reason I'm really passionate is we had an agreement in place, at least we thought we did, with the Department of Transportation, that we knew the Exit 4A tunnel, Exit 4A access road would be coming through DERRY. We knew that it was going to bisect the rail trail up by the police station and where Kelson Brewing is now. And we worked very hard with them to get an agreement that a tunnel would be placed under that road so that the trail would not be basically cut off. There was no formal writing, so we are going to build the trail, but it was in all of their initial plans. It had been the de facto solution, for a number of years that was presented to the community. That was in their plans, and it's actually the only plan that's been approved by the federal government, who is paying.
The 4A project has been on the drawing board for years and years and years. At this point, they just want to quote unquote get her done, and it was way too expensive, and they're saving $771,000 by not building the straight through box tunnel and by the alternative. So what's the matter with that?
Well, I think it's interesting if they've come up with that new number of 771,000. I would love for them to either produce the actual physical comparison documents to you as an attorney or someone. We've been asking for them for a couple of years now. We keep getting different numbers. It started out at $1.5 million in savings, dropped down to $1 million, dropped down to about 660,000 in a public presentation. We pointed out some errors in their math, which made it even lower. Now it seems like they've settled on this 770,000 number. We would love to see actually dollar to dollar comparison, plan-to-plan comparison.
What's wrong with the alternative? What's your strongest argument?
Sure. And I think, for folks who want a nice meandering path where they can go down by a stream and that sort of thing, some folks may find that attractive. In fact, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a terrible place to go. The challenge is that the Granite State Rail Trail is supposed to be an alternative transportation corridor, much like any rail trail. And rail trails themselves are supposed to be straight. They run along rail corridors. They are relatively flat with grades less than 1% to 2% in most cases. This alternative, to get to that bucolic little place that you talk about, is going to require folks to go down almost a 5% grade for 1/8 of a mile in one direction and 1/8 of a mile in the other direction. Come down to, they have to cross 2 private driveways. They have to cross a street at Furlan Drive. They have to take a 90-degree turn and then go into a long sweeping downhill 180-degree button hook loop where they actually took a house out and already demolished it. So again, is that cost in the mix? The concern is safety and also disabilities. A 5% grade doesn't sound like much, but if you get out there on a bike, it's a difficult grade to manage even for a short distance. You're now talking over a 1/4 mile of downhill and uphill grades at just under the American with Disabilities Act maximum. So for, a spandex warrior, as I like to say, someone who rides their bike all the time, that grade may not be so challenging to them. Someone who's in a wheelchair, walker, older people, mothers with small children on bicycles, they're going to pick up some speed going down those hills, and you're going to have people coming the other way at the same time, walking dogs, leashes, as you see on the rail trail now. And we just think with those driveways and the crossing of the street and those 90-degree turns and the sweeping curve all downhill into what's basically going to be a darkened area under the tunnel, under the bridge that they're building, we really see it being a safety issue. We had over 300 people call the governor's office on a single day to make their case for this. We had people go to Concord, as you say, to testify on behalf of the bill that Rep. Steve Pearson put in to try and force this to happen. Please check out our Facebook page. Stay there, stay engaged. We need as much help as we can, and we appreciate you, Andrew, for involving us in your podcast.
Okay, thank you. Mark, have a good day.
You too.
I'm on the Londonderry portion of the Granite State Rail Trail, just a few miles north of the Derry town line. Here in Londonderry, 4 huge bridges were built to accommodate the rail trail as it goes under I-93. There are 4 lanes of I-93 traffic above me, 4 lanes of I-93 southbound traffic, a southbound exit ramp, and a northbound exit ramp, all built over these 4 huge bridges that were built to accommodate the rail trail.
You're not saying that making this path be windy and all over the place is better than straight, are you?
Oh my, what you need to understand is that we've done studies in feasibility and we've studied this.
How are you going to tell me that that's any better than having it straight like the rest of the trail? It looks like spaghetti.
Well, what you need to understand is that the highway engineers have considered carefully all of the factors, and this is the most economically feasible plan.
You're trying to tell me this is more logical and feasible than just having it be a straight line like the rest of the rail trail?
Well, what you need to understand is that all of the stakeholders have been involved, and this is okay by the FHWA, FERA, the CRMY, and the NEMA.
What you're saying makes no sense, and I feel like you can hardly justify it.
Listen, we've studied economic feasibility, and this is the best plan, little missy.
Little Missy, get out of here!
We're going to talk to Brian Churchiello, who was a town councilor for a number of years. Brian has lived in Derry since 1985. Brian, I know that when the rail trail issue came up before the town council back in January of 2023, you voted not to make any more recommendations. First of all, why did you vote that way? And what was that all about?
Yeah, all right. Thanks for having me, Andy. I appreciate it. I just wanted to be clear to your audience that I'm speaking on my own behalf. I'm not speaking on behalf of the town council, even though I am still a member of the Derry Town Council. I'm here to give you the facts as I know it. or as I know them.
My understanding from going to the public hearing back in September, was that the rail trail tunnel, the box tunnel would have saved, doing the spaghetti loop instead of the box tunnel saves only $771,000. That's small potatoes in comparison to a $121 million project, isn't it?
Well, you got to back up a little bit, and you have to understand the fact that the state, which the town basically, both towns of Derry and Londonderry, handed the keys over to the state and said, "This is your baby now." The state did take that project over, went well over estimates. Their estimates would have been in the 60 million ballpark. You could see that it almost doubled. So what happened was the product got really expensive. With inflation and everything, it got very pricey. But the state was on the hook for that because, again, Derry and Londonderry had paid their $5 million. They weren't going to pay anything additional. So everything else is going to be additional to the state. Now, you mentioned the 775. That's for the box tunnel cost after they took it out. And I know that this timeline is we're mixing the timelines together here. But to answer your question, to make it simple, they took the box tunnel out to save money. And when they did that, to put the box tunnel back in would have added the 775,000 for the box tunnel itself, but there was additional costs for the engineering and there would be different land takings. And what I mean by land takings, they have to either take a little bit less or a little bit more land taking. So they projected that overall there'd be $1 million that somewhere would have to come from the state, and the state wasn't willing to pay that. And there's only a few people that really know how things shook out. And so what ended up happening is to save money, the state had come up with that alternative plan, as we talked about. And what happened was they went to Mike Fowler at the Public Works and they said, "Listen, we need to save money. This is what we're proposing." And Mike Fowler at Public Works said, "Yeah, that's fine. But one thing you have to do is you have to get sign off from the rail trail people because they're one of the stakeholders that would be affected." And so DOT did in fact contact the rail trail people, and there was a letter provided from the rail trail people, the president and the vice president, that said that they were fine with the alternative plan. And so then time went by. 18 months later, the rail trail people decided it was going to be a problem, but the horse has left the barn.
You mentioned that this has been on the drawing table for many years. I am going to point out that before I went to law school, I was a TV reporter over at Channel 9. I left that job in 1986 to go to law school. I did stories on Route 4A. So that's how long it has been.
Yeah.
It's been since the 1980s. You say you came to Derry in 1985. So
Right.
The issue is it's been 30, 40 years. If the thing's not going out to bid until March of next year, what's the big deal? Why not wait a little bit longer? and
Let's
do it?
let's be fair, Andy. For all those years we talked about 4A, the bike path wasn't even on the map. That's a more recent thing that's come along.
Wait a minute, I got to interject there. I've got to interject there. In 2003, I did my research. In 2003, using federal money, the New Hampshire DOT wrote a document, a study with regard to the rail trail going from Salem up to Vermont, and the Manchester, Lawrence, Boston line was specifically mentioned. So it has been on the map for many years.
Let's be fair, because I was
Okay.
actually, when I was a state rep, I was actually
Okay.
named on a special committee. It was SB 80 that was dealing with rail trails. I was actually a member of that. So you're right.
Okay.
They did talk about rail trails, and that's part of the state's recreational plan.
Yeah.
But in all fairness, in the town of Derry, what I'm talking about is in the town of Derry, when we talked about 4A, we really weren't talking about bike paths. And so the bike path issue, this is all fairly new, that the state changed the alternative plan. This is, a couple of years in the making. And then people have to realize the whole 4A project is pretty big project and what it's trying to accomplish. The bike path is a small portion of that. So I have to look at, do we want delays? And I will add one extra thing is the developer who owns the land in Londonderry also owns the piece of land that they had mentioned that they would give to the bike path people to connect. They did not want to see a delay either, because that would delay their project.
Well, in fairness to them, I'll interject. I always respect confidentiality with people I talk to who want to stay off the record.
Yeah.
So I hesitate to go further on that, but my understanding is very clearly that they don't have a dog in the fight. You're right. They just want to get this thing done, but they have been fairly clear that they don't favor the alternative or the through tunnel.
No, and so that's very, very similar to what I stated. I don't have a dog in the fight, although some people think because I've mentioned I don't want delays, they think I do have a dog in the fight, but I don't. I even stated up in Concord, I would take the box tunnel or the spaghetti loop. I'll still use it no matter what.
But you voted against it.
I voted, no, I didn't vote against it. You have to understand what the bike path people did is they came in front of us wanting the town of Derry to demand to the state that we put a box tunnel in. Now, the bike path people had a lawyer from Massachusetts with an opinion, but I'm in New Hampshire. The town of Derry, and it was me that asked for the town's legal opinion, whether we would be on the hook for this. And without breaking any confidentiality, again, we got a legal opinion saying, yeah, if the town of Derry is demanding the state put a box tunnel in, the contract is clear, which says, yes, the state can charge Derry. I made a promise to the taxpayers that I would pay no more than $5 million. So didn't everybody else on that town council. That's why it was unanimous to do nothing. We didn't vote for the box tunnel or the spaghetti loop. We voted not to stay pat. There's a big difference, and I want your viewers to understand that because that's huge.
The New Hampshire Department of Transportation relocated and widened New Hampshire Route 111. This beautiful bridge was built to accommodate, guess what? The Granite State Rail Trail as it goes through Windham, New Hampshire. Route 111 is a major road. Not far from where I'm crossing here is Interstate 93. And to your right, my left, the road goes through some pretty busy towns and over to Hampton Beach. It's a pretty busy road, and the rail trail was accommodated by the construction of this fairly nice bridge in Windham. Okay, you obviously know about the proposal for exit 4A and the straight through box tunnel and the loop alternative. How do you feel about it?
I feel that the tunnel is much more, it's easier for everybody. It's easier for bicyclists. It's easier for runners. Runners won't have to worry about bicyclists. I have a friend who is handicapped and rides one of those reclining bikes. She will have trouble getting through there, and she likes to be on this trail. And she goes far. She's still very active athletically, but that would be very difficult with that ramp. A straight through makes much more sense, and you don't have to deal with traffic coming over and trying to get people across. I know it's hard enough on some of these smaller roads to get people across, but if they're coming off the highway, I've almost been hit in places myself. We don't need to have other incidents where people are almost hit.
I'm sure you're aware that the town council in Derry voted against recommending the straight-through box tunnel, and they and the Department of Transportation are saying that they just want to get 4A done. It's been too long and it would cost too much money. How do you feel about that statement?
I'm all for doing things right. Was a teacher for a lot of years, and it's not a matter of getting things done to get it done. You've got to do it right because you'll regret it a year or 2 or 5, whatever. The time a person gets hit or someone has an incident on that loop that they're thinking about. All of these trails took a long time to do.
This is what a box tunnel looks like. When the rail trail was in the way of a subdivision that was pushing further and further into the woods in Windham, New Hampshire, this box tunnel was brought in 2 pieces. 1, 2. And the rail trail was excavated down. This tunnel was brought in with heavy equipment, and then the rail trail was built up again. All of that was done here in Windham, New Hampshire, in order to accommodate the Granite State Rail Trail as it runs above here in Windham. All of that work was done, yes, with a box tunnel to allow this street, Mallard Road, to continue to push further and further. And they built houses here in the woods. Nice houses, but they're in the woods. And they made sure that the rail trail could stay intact through the box tunnel. We've made every effort in this podcast to be fair and accurate and bring you all the information that we possibly can. I did a lot of interviews off the record, and I also put out a number of calls to people, some of whom talked to me off the record, some of whom did not call me back. If I called you and you didn't call me back and you have information you wanted to get in the podcast, we are done with the podcast, and we have some other legal issues that we will be concentrating on in future issues. So if you didn't call us, or if you didn't want to come out of your office, we're sorry.
It would have been nice to hear some objective reasoning as to why we can't just make this straight, but it seems like a lot of the answers were conflicting. So what do you guys think?
So if you do have comments that you would have liked us to have included in this podcast, please feel free to comment down below. And as always, we ask all of our viewers to like and subscribe to this channel. But for now, we are planning some other issues coming up in the podcast in the future. So please remember to like and subscribe, and thank you for watching us.
And be sure to share it with all your friends. Have a wonderful day, New Hampshire. This has been About the Law.
Thank you.
You have been watching About the Law, a production of the law offices of Andrew D. Myers in Methuen, in the Merrimack Valley of Massachusetts, and Derry, New Hampshire. Please give us a like and subscribe. The foregoing is offered for informational purpose only. It is not intended as, nor does it constitute, legal advice. Laws vary widely from state to state. You should rely only on the advice given to you during a personal consultation by a local attorney who is thoroughly familiar with state laws and the area of practice in which your concern lies.